Well, hello there. You join me on a Thursday afternoon, very rainy Thursday afternoon. We've just had some thunder and lightning up in Beverley, which is about, according to the map, about 5.5 miles away from me. And of course we counted it, and it was about 5 seconds between the thunder and the lightning. Or should I say the other way around, between the lightning and the thunder. So, yeah, according to my map, it was 5 miles away. So, yeah, good. Anyway, so I want to talk, continue. Sorry, just I was touching the tripod thingy that I've got. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to continue the old man of the sea stories, and one person asked me what was the medical treatment. Do we have doctors and nurses on board? Well, I shall tell you. When I first went to sea, many years ago, we used to have quite a few people on board. We used to have a radio operator, we used to have an electrician, we used to have a chief steward, a cook, a second cook, a galley boy, and 2 stewards for the catering department. And for the deck side, we would have obviously the captain. We had the first, second and third officers navigating. And in the engine room, we used to have the chief engineer, the first engineer, 2 second engineers, and 2 third engineers. Now, I started off as the third. I didn't go as 4th engineer because there wasn't any 4th engineer's jobs going. There was a 3rd engineer's job going, so I jumped straight at the chance of going as 3rd. And we also had on the crew side, we had a bosun, and we had about 6 deck crew. And also in the engine room, we would have 2 motormen and a wiper. Now the wiper would spend all day cleaning. As you can imagine, in a large engine room, there would be oil leaks galore, and steam leaks, and fuel leaks, and you name it, hydraulic oil leaks, everything would leak. And everything would go into the bilges. The bilges, you didn't want to go down there because it was horrid. So anyway, the law introduced these oily water separators to separate out the oil from the bilge water, so we could pump the bilge water overboard. Anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, so back in those days, the chief steward would also act as a bit of a first aider as well. And also the catering department were trained in basic first aid. Same as me, I'm trained in basic first aid. But the ship's medical people would have been the captain and the first officer, because they're trained. They have what they call a captain's medical certificate, which means that they can inject and they can also stitch wounds as well. But no, we don't have any doctors or nurses on board, which when you get to my old age, because I'm diabetic and stuff like this, and I have to go to the doctor to get my medication, and every time I go in, I ask for my medication to last me the length of the voyage and maybe some time before and after, so that I don't have to panic about getting my medication ready before I go. And the amount of grief I get from the doctors saying, but we only give a month at a time. Well, I could be away for 6 weeks at a time, so can you give me, at least 6 months worth of, 6 weeks worth of medication? And they go, no, we can only do it in 4 weeks batches. So the way I worked it out, the way I was working 2 months away and a month at home. So I said to the doctor, well, if you give me 3 months worth of medication, that will last me all my leave and the entire time that I'm away. And then when I come home, I can get another 3 months worth of medication, and then that will last all my leave and all my time away. And when you see the nurse, the practice nurse, you say to her, I work away on a ship and I need, I need this and that for my voyage away. And she said, have you got a doctor on board? Well, not really. Can you go to a chemist when you're away? Well, so quite often when you're away at sea, the nearest land is 1,000 miles away in the wrong direction. So no, I can't go to a chemist. So that's what I have to do. On board ship, I have to take all my medication that I need for the entire length of the voyage. Also, as a merchant seafarer, we have to have what they call an ENG1 medical exam. That lasts between a year and 2 years, depending on how generous the doctor feels, or whether he wants a bit more income from having to see you twice, because it costs about £110 to get this medical certificate. And my last doctor that I went to see to give me a medical certificate cottoned on to this, that if he saw me every year, he would get an extra £110 in his pocket, cash. He only took cash. But whereas other doctors are giving me a 2-year medical. It used to be 4 years back in the olden days, but they've reduced it down to a year, or 2 years. It's a year in my case. Because I'm diabetic, they want to keep an eye on, just make sure everything's okay. Anyway, so that's it then. When you're on board ship, you've got a ship's captain who might be able to give you an injection. We do have a medical locker that might contain penicillin in case anyone comes up with an infection, or other types of antibiotics. We'll also have things for coughs and colds. And but yeah, talking about the first aid box, down into the engine room it's fair enough. If you cut your hand off, we can stop the bleeding. But if you just cut your finger and you want a plaster, you're not allowed to have plasters, because it's not in the regulations that your first aid box contains elastoplasts for your finger. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? So you cut your arm off and you can do something about it, but cut your finger a bit and there's nothing you can do. You have to just suffer and let it go infected, and then they'll put a big bandage on it. Anyway, yeah, I know all that. But yeah, anyway, my first trip at sea after I'd finished my cadetship, we were just leaving New York Harbour, and I slipped on a tiny, tiny spot of oil on the deck. I didn't see it. Anyway, I put my heel on that spot of oil, and my foot shot out in front of me, and I skidded and I slipped and jammed my leg under the first rung of a flight of stairs, and I gouged an inch square piece of skin out of my leg. In fact, later on I found out they'd actually tucked it underneath and pushed underneath the skin, so what was left was this little square of bone sticking out that I could see. Anyway, I went to get some medical attention, and there was nobody available. No one could look at my leg, not even put a bandage on. Anyway, so that was a bit, the steward that tidied my cabin was a bit upset that I got blood all over his blanket, or his nice sheets. Anyway, so I couldn't get any medical treatment until we got all the way down to one of the Virgin Islands, and my leg had swollen up and it was black. It was well infected, and anyway, it wasn't until we got out to one of the Virgin Islands that I managed to get some medical attention. The doctor came on board and gave me a shot of penicillin in my arse, and I was on the mend after that. Luckily, or unluckily, whatever you want to call it, when I went up to the bridge to see this doctor who had come on board, there was a big tall lip. So as I lifted my leg over to go onto the bridge to have a word with this doctor, so I scraped the scab off this wound, and all this stuff came out. But boy, was that a relief! It really did, well, it took the pain off my leg anyway for a bit. But yeah, anyway, the penicillin worked, and my leg was on the heel. It still gives me a bit of grief now, 30 odd years later. But no, yeah, I have injured myself on board ship. I've had I did injured my knee that resulted in a knee replacement 10 years after I'd injured my knee, and yeah, that was probably the worst injury. But yeah, I've had slips, trips and falls, and I've fallen off ladders, and injured myself. Many a bruise. Never a broken bone though, so that's a good thing. But yeah, I was witness to a Filipino gentleman. We'll call him Eduardo to save his embarrassment in case he ever watches this. But he was doing a little job for me. He got so excited about showing what a good job he'd done. He'd actually forgotten to secure the work in place, and as he lifted this thing over, this thing dropped and took fingers off. He took 3 fingers off one hand and 2 fingers off the other hand. It sliced these fingers off here, and these fingers, it took 3 of those fingers off. Anyway, we managed to gather his fingers up and put them in a freezer bag and put it on ice. And luckily we were close enough to a place called Jeddah up the Red Sea. Just as you come out of Suez, normally our first port would have been Jeddah in Saudi. But anyway, we were going north up to the Suez Canal, so we diverted into Jeddah, and obviously his hands were bandaged up, and we escorted him off down the gangway to a pilot boat, and the pilot boat took him in to get medical treatment. But the company, this is Maersk, in their infinite wisdom, decided to send him home, despite the surgeon saying, look, we've only just managed to attach his fingers. He really needs to stay here so that his hands can knit together. Anyway, the company said, no, we'll send him home. So they put him on an airplane, and of course at low altitude things happened, and anyway, by the time he got back, 3 of his fingers had popped off, but these 2 were saved. So he was happy. But he was a welder, and he could still weld with these 2 fingers and his thumb. He could still weld, do his job. So that was a bit of a relief. But yeah, I was as he cut these fingers off, he lifted his hands up like this, with his fingers pointing at me, and I was covered in his blood from top to bottom. So that wasn't particularly nice. It did take a few years to get over that, but I am pleased to say that Eduardo is back at sea. He was back at sea a few months later after he'd hurt himself, and he's doing okay, which is rather pleasing. He was a nice chap. I really liked him. He was so keen to please. You know, it's just amazing what a nice chap he was. And most of the Filipino seafarers that I've met in my time have been really, really nice people, and I'm glad that I made their acquaintance, really. Anyway, so that's it. Tales of the sea and what happens if you have a medical emergency. I have had, one other story. We had a guy that had a bit of a stroke. This was a fridge engineer. In addition to all the other people that we had, we also had, on some occasions, we had fridge engineers. And he went down to a hold one day to inspect his fridge containers. Anyway, he came back up and said he had a bad headache, and promptly collapsed onto the floor, shaking. So that was a bit of something to worry about. Anyway, the funny thing was, the clock stopped. The minute he fell over with this shaking and trembling, was the ship's clock in the engine room suddenly stopped. How spooky is that? Anyway, he got airlifted off. We were near Australia at the time, and he got airlifted off to Fremantle, I think it was, and we continued on our way, and we met up with him back in port, and he was sent home for assessment at home, which was rather lucky. But yes, we do we do try to look after our staff at sea. There has been a few fatalities, and that was on a passenger ship I was on, but that was the passengers. One old man had a heart attack, but this is this is what they say. The doctors that we had on a passenger ship, obviously they weren't for the crew; they were for the passengers. They would actually tell us that that's what they did. The old people would come away to sea, and would they promptly die on board ship, which, you know, bit of a shame, but that's what they used to do. But anyway, right. So I've waffled on. I've gone on for a good 15 odd minutes. So yeah, I'm going to do a vlog next anyway. So catch you later. Bye then.